We're recording. I think this is working. Avoid legal Skype. A ton of people that are. Oh yeah, Skype just legally is telling me to tell you guys that we're being recorded, just to in case there's any legal entanglements. But anyway, this is the first. The doctor is in that we're trying via Skype. So I have no idea how it's actually going to go. But Racco, nice to see you every week. And Corey, it's nice to meet you, bud.
Hey, good to be here.
We've texted back and forth in the group chat a little bit, and now I'm finally getting to see you face to face. But Racco had the idea of bringing you on because he had a very specific direction he wanted to take this week's episode in. So, Rock, I'm just going to pass it off to you, and you can kind of let it go, and we'll just take it from there.
So, specific is giving me way too much credit. I was walking through the airport. I was like, man, we should have Corey on, I think. And basically the reason why, and I texted and said it in the thread, is like years ago, probably 8-10 years ago, I was listening to a podcast and the guy talking, very successful, and appeared to and still have a very amazing relationship with his wife, right? And in that, most people are like, oh, you can't be successful in business and have a good relationship and blah, blah, blah. And he kind of flew in the face of that. And I thought it was awesome. But he said that the most important business decision you're ever going to make in your entire life is the woman you decide to marry. And like that kind of stuck with me forever. Like I should have ridiculously high standards for my wife. Like that makes sense. Like you wouldn't just go invest in a company without knowing about it and if it was a bad investment, right? And maybe that's a little crude, but anyways, it stuck with me. And so I was walking through the airport and I don't know why, but I was like, man, like I'm starting to embark on a new venture in life and taking what I do a very different direction, which puts a little bit more stress on Christy to, kind of do more of the stuff, maybe work a little longer or something so I have more freedom. And I was like, I distinctly remember Corey taking this leap of faith to become a writer, which by the way, everybody, I guess I should backtrack there. So Corey is a self-published author, and you want to give a background on that real quick, Corey?
Yeah, sure. Prior to jumping into writing with this leap of faith, which kind of feels like I'm still in the air on that leap. But prior to that, I got my degree in anthropology, and I worked as a archaeological field technician for a little while. And talking about relationships, that was not a career move that ended up being very good for somebody who was a newlywed. I was on the road every week. I mean, like Monday through Friday, I was gone because I was traveling around. It was not like I wasn't super far away, but we were living in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, and I was typically like on the other side of West Virginia, or I was in Virginia, or I was up north in PA, which is where I'm originally from. And, I wasn't seeing my wife, Monday through Friday. I was in hotels and I wouldn't even see her until the weekend. And I had always been a writer. I'd always wanted to, write fiction stories and stuff. And at some point I decided, I was like, I'm going to give this self-publishing thing a try. I'm going to I already have this book. I'm going to put it out there and see what happens. But I knew that I would need to devote full-time hours to being able to get it done. And so I came to Vanessa with this crazy idea. I was like, I want to quit my job and just stay home and work on this book and put it out there and see what happens. And the cool thing is that she totally supported it. But the really cool thing is that when that book did not become like an overnight success or whatever, she still supported it, right?
Right.
And that I'm still working on being a fiction author too, but that career kind of branched off, and I ended up doing some editing for people who were writing their own novels, and that turned into some proofreading for articles that people put out there. And now most of my work that I do is freelance copy editing, ghostwriting. I write some. Ghostwriting is a whole other thing. It's like a whole other industry where you kind of write somebody's book for them. And I do a lot of proofreading for other people. And I've still got my fiction writing thing going. But I definitely, first of all, I think if I would have gone to her with that idea, this was when we were already married. She's my best friend, and I know that whatever I want to do the best for her and both of us. And I think if I would have gone to her and said like, well, I have this crazy idea, and if she would have been like, yeah, that sounds maybe, I probably would have been like, yeah, you're right. And I would have, I might not have kept doing what I was doing, but I might not have taken that leap if I didn't get the impression that she was cool with it. But she believed in me 100%, and that gave me the guts to really be like, okay, I'm going to try this, not just for me, but for both of us. And like I said, you called it a leap of faith, totally a leap of faith, still kind of out there with a leap of faith. But, every year that goes by, I'm seeing the progress that I'm making. And it's like I have to keep reminding myself for my own ambitions and everything, everybody who you think is an overnight success, that overnight success took 5 or 10 years before the overnight success occurred.
Right.
So that's where I'm at with my fiction writing. But anyway, that was a long introduction.
No,
Thank you for having me on.
That's perfect.
This is actually my first podcast I've ever been on. So
that's awesome. I mean, that's what a lot of people talk about, though, is like success is basically. I've talked to a lot of. I'm actually friends with someone who's a fellow with an HP, and he was like, you have to hold the line long enough, and it's just basically like a J. Like you just go like you have this little bump at the beginning where you have this momentum, and then it's just like for a couple years, then boom, and you're just holy shit, like this happened.
That's kind of the thing, and I think everyone's heard the saying like 90% of like startups fail, right? Like I think everyone's always heard that, but what you don't necessarily take into account is, yeah, that might be true, but of that 90%, like they didn't push through. Like people start something and they expect it to be an overnight success, and then and even in our culture now, everything we want is like instant gratification, whether it's, likes or you put up a picture and you don't get enough likes or comments that you want or whatever.
Or you don't buy something on Amazon because it's not Prime.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I can't get here in 2 days. Like, what the fuck is that? But that's ultimately like why then it fails. Is because like it doesn't happen like within 6 months. It might not be a year. It might not be 3 years. Like it might, like you said, it might be like 5, 6, 10 years down the road. But you got to keep grinding through. Like I think people just think like, oh, like I'm gonna put Corey, just to take your case, like I'm gonna put a book out there and it's gonna be a New York Times bestseller, and I'm gonna be rich and famous, and I'm gonna go on Oprah and she's gonna introduce me, and that's not necessarily exactly how it happens when you write one book, or when you start a podcast, or when you start a YouTube channel, or anything like that. So I think like it's just something to kind of take, you got to kind of like assess the situation and almost think of it as like, all right, yes, like a lot of these things do fail, but why is it failing? Is it failing because it's a bad idea? Is it failing because maybe you're just not giving it the time or the effort that you necessarily need to? Like, I think it's something it's interesting to think about,
I think one of the things that's what you brought up that like basically the core of everything I want to touch on is like, so you bring her this idea and that she is like your anchor in essence, right? Like this is the person you chose to spend the rest of your life with. So her opinion is massively valuable to you. And if she was like, hey, not a good idea, you're going to suppress obviously an urge you've had your entire life of some type of creativeness trying to bubble up, right? You already had the book written. So like, you know what I mean? So if she tells you that, I think that's where a massive divide in relationships can start to happen, because, I experienced the same thing with Christy. It's like, look, I want to do these things. I want to take these steps. Or she'll tell me, and it's like, let's go all in. Like I'm supporting you, right? And when that doesn't happen, I think at a very unconscious level, like in your subconscious mind, you would have held some type of animosity towards her, because what your soul was trying to express, you viewed her as not allowing, or would have viewed her as not allowing. And so instead of having this awesome relationship that you have now, it could have took another turn. And I think that's a huge thing that people are very unconscious of in relationships. Anyways, my observation.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that too. And I think probably innately, I was drawn to somebody who would support that, though. You know what I mean? Like, And I think when you have a super strong relationship and, you know, the person you're with is like your best friend in addition to being your partner, you know, if they tell you something is a bad idea, you know, they might actually know better than you do. You know, like I think if she would have said that to me, maybe I would have, you know, felt animosity and been like, oh, you know, I don't think I would have been with somebody who would like stomp on my dream necessarily, but
Correct.
like if she had expressed that, I probably would have had to take a step back and be like, oh, like maybe I haven't thought it through yet.
Right.
Because I think she would support something that, I don't know. It's like a weird, almost self-fulfilling prophecy sort of thing. Like
Yeah,
where,
it's kind of like a delicate balance, right?
yeah.
Because
Hmm.
you know, here you are, you've got this idea, you've written the book already, and you're basically teetering on the edge of, do I want to dive all in, or is this just going to kind of, you know, remain this kind of hobby or like dream that I have? And yeah, you're right. Like here you are, you presented it with this idea, and it could have either gone like absolutely yes, let's do this, like which is what happened, or it's just like, you know, I don't really know, and then you probably could have rationalized it in your own head as just like, hey, yeah, maybe it was a crazy idea, and but like at the end of the day, like you never know, and I think that's kind of like what the whole. I'm assuming Rocco, this is why you kind of like brought up this topic is like you never really know which way it's going to go, and you kind of want to find someone who kind of cultivates that creativity and that strive and that drive in you, right? And
Yeah, and that's kind of where everything. I mean, so that's where Christy and I come back to is like we always have this check and balance system with each other where it's like, are you pushing yourself basically to be better at some level every day? And I think that's huge. And that comes back to like the quote unquote business decision. But I think, you know, there's when I originally brought this up to Len, there was like an interplay between like, and we're gonna do a podcast on this later, but I'll tease it now. Um, like they call it toxic masculinity now, right? Or they call it like super feminist or whatever these things. And there's a massive difference between toxic masculinity and being a man, right? And like you don't have to be a professional football player to be a man. That person could very well be a toxic man, right? Like not an actual embodying the full essence of a fully integrated male. And we'll talk about all these in another podcast. But I think that what you touched on there is that you wouldn't be with someone who wouldn't support that. To me, that's like you wouldn't be with a weak person, if that makes sense. And I'm a little more harsh than everybody else, but like you need a strong woman because you embody the masculine. And if you didn't, you wouldn't be able to handle if she would have told you, not a good idea, Corey. Because I've had ideas that she's like, I don't know, you know,
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, you know, but like if you can't handle that, like, so I think that this divine masculine and the divine feminine truly pull out the best of each other, and that foundation is really what matters. I know that's kind of off, but it like I think it all encompasses into each other because it's that level of trust at a deep innate level. Like if you were weak, you're not going to attract a strong person, or you're going to attract an overly strong person to compensate for it. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say?
Yes, yeah, I
Mhm.
totally agree with you. And and what you were saying about, you know, the whole toxic masculinity thing and everything, I think that there's like such a weird, like whenever I hear somebody talking about that, I can almost see like they're projecting something onto
Yeah.
that from their own past experience because like, you know, I don't necessarily get it. And I think I was blessed in that regard to be around, you know, like I was raised by a good dad and I had all very good masculine influences around me. So like when I hear about toxic masculinity, I'm like, okay, these people are projecting something that happened to them, I think, that was really, really bad. So
Right.
there is
Right.
bad out there, but you know, I don't think that they see that masculine is not necessarily a bad thing. You know,
Right.
like
And I think Rocco, we talked about this a little bit. Like when you sent out the text to both of us, and I think we started texting like separately. And I kind of said like I'm not sure, and I know we weren't necessarily going to address this today, but here we are. So was that like I even questioned like, and you know I'm probably going to get shit for this if the wrong person listens to this, but like is toxic masculinity, is it actually a thing, or is it just a dude who's a dickhead? Like You know what I'm trying to say? And I think Corey, you just brought this up. Like it might be someone projecting some sort of past transgression onto someone, but is toxic masculinity actually just a thing, or is it just maybe there's obviously a handful of men out there who have a machismo or whatever it is about them who are just assholes and call it what it is. Like maybe they're just an asshole. So I think like I'm not trying to like reinvent the wheel or anything with this. I'm just it's a question because it was funny because you had brought this up maybe I don't know a week or so ago, and then I had met like another friend who had actually brought it up, and it was just kind of funny that a couple of people had actually like brought this up. Different people from completely different like parts of my life who had just brought like the same topic up. So I was just kind of like curious about it because it's kind of a weird thing. And we also, again, live in this culture where everything needs to be almost like an attack or like, well, someone's doing something that I don't like, so I need to like bring them down. And it could be anything. It doesn't necessarily need to be like toxic masculinity. Like people use feminism as like a condescending term. And I don't necessarily think feminism is a condescending term. I think feminism is a wonderful thing. Like females are obviously equal to males. And, homosexuals are obviously equal to like straight people and blah blah blah. Like it doesn't really matter like what your orientation is. If you're male, female, straight, gay, whatever. But it's people have this like pedestal of like, all right, well here's someone who's kind of at the top, and we need to take them down a peg, or like it's viewed to be at the top, and I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing, and I don't really necessarily know how to like navigate it or understand it because sometimes it's just kind of like a weird, kind of awkward topic. You know what I'm trying to say? Does that make sense? Or
Yeah,
like,
I think that I agree with you, and I think part of the issue is just that things I think changed so fast. Like, I mean, even like my dad, like I said, he's like one of the best men that I know in my entire life, and he respects my mom so much, and
mhm.
they're best friends, they're partners, they do anything for one another. But even that one generation gap, there are things that like my dad will say to my mom that I was like, I would never say that to, like Vanessa, I would never say that to any woman, you know, of our age or any generation, like I'm like, how does he get away with that? And it's like it's because so much has changed, I think, in between generations. It's just like how you're expected to act. And I think a lot of people just care a lot to make sure that justice is done. And unfortunately that ends up, like you said, it's turns into more of an attack than anything. And
Yeah,
so
and I think it's all well and good to want to be like nice and respectful to everyone. I think generally, if you ask anyone, if you walk down the street and ask anyone, like, should you be a dick to this group of people? Like, they're probably going to be like, no, of course you shouldn't. And sometimes I think that's where we kind of get into this whole significant like divide thing is like people want to be so nice or overcompensate so much of the time and be like, well, I'm on the side of like the just, that it almost becomes like this extreme. And then that's when it kind of snowballs into this, well, like you don't fall into this category of, necessarily, and I'm not saying like accepting everyone, like, but and if you don't fall into this category that I perceive that you should be in, like, then I have to take you down a peg. Like, I don't know, it's a weird kind of culture that we live in where, like, if you don't agree with me, like 100%, then like you're wrong, and I'm going to tell you to your face. I'm going to take you down a step, and
See, and I think that's where the problem with the relationships are starting to come in. Why everything's such a disaster right now. Why no one can find love. Why no one can meet anybody, because they enter it with that, right? Like it's not entered like the three of us entered our relationships. And I think again, like I think the innate of a man wants a very powerful woman. And I think the innate of a woman wants a very powerful man. And I believe you can trace that back in history. Like I don't know a single successful or powerful man or woman that doesn't have an equally successful or powerful or supportive partner, right? That then pushes in all aspects of life. So I think that's kind of like where I'm like, all right, I want to explore that on here because I know that like she's had to sacrifice, I'm assuming, a lot for you to be able to do what you've done, you know, and like that's super selfless, but massively powerful to be like, I got it, Corey. Like,
Yeah.
does that make sense? You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. No, and I think that's I think Rocco, you actually brought it up and kind of tied it in nicely, because I think that's where maybe some people get that whole toxic masculinity thing. Is you think I think when some people think of like a toxic man or a powerful man, they kind of almost mesh or intertwine the two. And to me, this is how they're different, because you said it, like a powerful man wants a powerful woman, whereas a toxic man wants a weak woman that he can dominate.
Correct.
And that's the difference. I think it's not the conjoined effort to create something huge and fantastic and powerful. It's this need to dominate and belittle and put down. And I think that's where that difference comes in. Right? And
yeah. That, I mean, that's it. Because then you would argue that that's actually not that he, like Corey said, is projecting massive insecurities.
Well, yeah, exactly.
I mean, like,
that's not a relationship. It's just
right.
Whatever it is.
And I think it's also important too to be, I think it's very humbling as a man, and you can correct me or chime in, Corey, if you want, but like Vanessa, again, I'm making assumptions, so correct me, but she had to take on the role of the breadwinner, and that is not culturally normal. That is not easy to accept as a man. I mean, it's just not. Like, so I don't know. I think that like all of that is like, it wasn't it wasn't just like, oh, we're doing this. Like there was a massive shift in like the evolution of the two of you and how that relationship dynamic was going to go. And I'm not singling you out. I think it's important to like, Len and I are always talking about ourselves and our relationships. And I'm like, I know firsthand that like this happened and it's blossoming and it's a strong relationship. And I mean, I talk about this on Judson's podcast. You know, we talked about still having sex with our wives. We're about to pop out another baby. So obviously you guys still are intimate. Like that's a huge part. Like Christine and I talk about how finances and lack of intimacy can tear apart a relationship because you still have hormones. Like just because you got married, like you need to still cultivate that. I don't know. It's a whole process, but feel free to chime in.
Well, actually, Corey, do you mind going into a little bit, and you know, if it's not something you're comfortable talking about, please tell me. But just how like maybe the dynamic shifted when, you know, she said, yes, let's go for this, and then you really dove into the writing. Like how did that kind of like shift you know, in the relationship or whatever?
The cool thing is that she's a speech pathologist, and so she, you know, right out of college, got a pretty decent job. She's, you know, making some pretty good money, and so, you know, even at the beginning of our relationship, before I decided to go for this writing thing, she's already making more money than me. She's already the breadwinner in the situation. So I'm like, you know, please, can I do this? No, just kidding.
A lot of men though tie their worth to their bank account. That's what I was getting at. But go ahead.
Yeah, they absolutely do, and
it's not necessarily a healthy thing to do. But
anyways, continue, Corey. Sorry.
Oh, that's cool. It helped that Len, are you married? I didn't get to ask.
No,
you.
No. Engaged, due to be married in March.
Awesome, congratulations.
But they live together, so they're living in sin.
Uh-oh.
Right. We're a bunch of heathens over here.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no. Well, it helped, I think, that like Vanessa and I started our relationship as best friends. And like from there, it kind of just like ran its natural course. And, you know, it definitely helps to just be married to your best friend. Because I mean, I think some of the biggest mistakes that I've made as a husband in my relationship with her, especially early on, is when I tried to be what I thought a husband was supposed to be, instead of relying on just that instinct that got us together in the first place, which was just being friends. You know, like sometimes there have been times when I've tried to behave in a way that I thought was right because I'm like, well, a strong, tough husband would do this and would, he would say this or he would whatever. And then you end up just like in separate rooms and, having a really awkward evening and just being like, what happened? Like, what did I do wrong? And then you just think like, I need to be this person's friend, like she needs her best friend right now. And her best friend needs to come and rescue her from her jerk of a husband. And guess what? You are both of those people. So like get in there and make it right.
Figure it out.
And so I think early on that was a dynamic of our relationship that I had to really figure out. Which doesn't really, that's kind of off topic, but
nothing's off topic here.
Yeah, okay, we're good, man.
I think that was huge what you said, but continue.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
But like you said, when I brought the idea to her, I would like to jump in and really give this thing a shot. That was not the end of a journey. That was the beginning of a journey. That was the first step towards something that I'm still trying to walk toward. And right now I've got several books out there. I'm working on the next one. I'm working on new things for clients all the time because freelance work is what I do most of the time now. And she tells me all the time, like, I'm really proud of you for what you've put together. And, I have trouble feeling that way about myself because all I can look around at and be like, all I look around and see is like, here's where I am and here's where I should be, like, and I'm not doing as much as I should be doing. I'm not doing as good as I need to be doing right now. And like every once in a while, I think she could tell that and she'll kind of be like, hey, look at what you've done. Like, look at all this stuff. You did this all on your own steam. You didn't go to school for this. You put in the work to learn it all, and it's not going to happen overnight. You're building something up. You're working steadily toward it, and look what you've accomplished so far. And having that support is huge because without that support, I would have gone back to, what I was doing before, or I would have tried something else by now. Definitely,
No, I think you touched on a lot of stuff there. The shit. This is one I blank. Can't remember what you said. Fuck. It was awesome. Go ahead. You guys talk. Let me think for a second.
Were you talking about like when he starts to doubt himself and look at everything you've accomplished?
Oh, so I think that's
there you go.
You got too distracted by all the nerdy stuff on my bookshelf.
I was looking at everything. I'm like, so I think that's super important. And you had mentioned before, like, I don't necessarily care what other people think about much of anything. You've known me for a very long time, Corey. I'm pretty much going to do what I want, and that's that. But then once Christy entered my life, it massively changed. Like all of a sudden there was this person that I really cared about what she thought about what I did or how I did it. And I'm like, what the hell is this? And what's happening right now? And so I've done podcasts or I've done other things where I've had people be like, that's not you. We didn't like it, whatever. And I'm like, So I make her go listen to it because
that was like our first couple ones.
Yeah, because I'm like, go listen to it and tell me the honest truth.
Yeah.
And then when she comes back and she's like, nope, that was 100% you. Like that's you all the time. That's what I like to see. Like the world needs that, not this, watered down version of you that society should have. And I'm like, oh, holy shit. Like, but then what that allowed me to do was like step into me more as opposed to like focusing on like, oh my God, am I doing this wrong? Should I not? Like all those types of things. So I stepped into it more and I'm like, no. This is exactly who I'm supposed to be, and this is exactly what I'm doing. And it was a very different interplay for me to like find somebody who I cared massively about their opinion. And like you said, it's like you end up in separate rooms. Man, we've tried everything. And we've gone through all of that stuff, but like realizing, because we're also best friends, right? We spend all of our time together. Like other people like want to get away from their wife, and I'm like, I'm trying to spend more time with my wife. Like it's like we don't want to be apart, and it's been like that for 7 years. And so I think that like when something happens, like taking the step back and being like, oh, I probably caused that. Or the vice versa. She'll be like, but we don't let it go forever, right? Like we come back immediately. Like we have this check and balance system that we've developed over like 7 years that's like, hey, nope, that one was on me. And I definitely, you're right. Like, let's figure this out together. Or why am I feeling this way? Well, what past childhood experience are you bringing into this that's literally an irrelevant experience that's not part of your belief system anymore, and it's like, well, this and this, perfect, this is an amazing opportunity to stomp that shit out so that it never comes back. Like, this isn't that relationship. So I mean, I think having a relationship that like this with a woman is so much hard work that no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to be like, no one wants to get to the nitty gritty because they watch New Girl and they're like, oh my God, this is how it should be. Like, oh my God, no. Like
never watched a single episode of that.
It's actually kind of.
I've heard it's delightful. Yeah.
but it's like people get caught up into this fantasy of a relationship, and I'm not saying relationships are always like at each other's throats, because we really aren't at each other's throats. Like at first we were, because we're two very, I like to say, powerful people that had to figure out how to cohabitate, whatever word that is, coexist together. And that was difficult because you butted heads a lot, both alphas in essence. But my God, once you figure it out. And I think that's where everybody's just like anything. The reason the books are going to be successful, the reason anything Len and I is going to do is be successful, is we hold the line long enough. Oh my God, like you have an anchor that's so strong. So I don't know. That's kind of my take on it. If that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think, like you said, like...
Did we lose Corey?
Am I frozen?
Well, you physically look frozen, but I heard you. So
yeah, let me just...
should we wait it out a little bit?
Hold on. This is a good opportunity for this.
Just turn off the...
Oh, wait, we lost him. Is he coming back? There he is.
Back?
Yep.
You're back.
All right.
I can't see you, though.
You can't see me?
No? I can see you.
Aw. That's all right.
I see Blue. He looks glorious. No? Anybody? Old school? No?
Don't worry about it. Yes, I got it. I was trying to figure out how to see everybody.
Sorry. Must have lost.
No, but Racco, I thought you brought up a good thing to talk about, because like I think people tend to shy away from conflict, and whether that's with a spouse or friend or coworker or whatever, I think you need to understand that, like, when you do, like you said, you consider yourself and Christy two powerful people. I mean, there's two powerful people in a room, in a relationship, and whatever. Like, there's going to be friction, there's going to be conflict, and it's all about how you end up dealing with it. Like, are you gonna just let it escalate and sit there and fester, and so it ruins like the rest of your week, or are you gonna say, all right, I'm gonna be pissed for like 5 minutes, I'm gonna take a breath, and we're going to come back and we're going to address this head on, and then we're going to figure it out. And like you said, like, is this something that just got under your skin because something happened to you 10 years ago and it just brought it back up, and now you're just like pissed irrationally? Or did I say something, or did I do something, or is this striking a nerve with me? And I think how you just address that and deal with it is a huge thing. And I think that ends up, again, playing into how you build those relationships. And then that, again, like, works into how now if you have two people who are powerful and, you can conflict, figure it out, move past it. And now you have people who can, empower each other. Like, that'll say, yes, write your book, do your seminar, do your YouTube channel, whatever. Right?
Yep. I think, one of the things I think you brought up there too that's super important is, so I teach Sloan this now. It's very difficult to teach a 3-year-old, but we're working through it. Is that, like, you need to feel your emotions. This is something I think this is probably a long conversation, but we'll touch on it real quick. You need to feel your emotions, but you're not a slave to your emotions, right? Like society today has become massive slaves to their emotions. I feel like getting a Starbucks, or I feel like getting ice cream, or I feel like this, or whatever. And they just go all into it instead of like, and I probably learned this from arguments from Christy and books and whatever, but I like to feel the emotion, have that experience of, I'm fucking pissed. Fine. Be pissed, be angry, be sad, cry, whatever you have to do. But after a reasonable amount of time, you just threw out 5 minutes in general conversation, whatever.
Yeah.
Then you're like, all right, I felt these feelings. Now I need to separate from the situation and I need to analyze it because I'm actually in control of my feelings. I need to feel them and then I need to be in control of them because that's how you enhance your life, right? So that's like trying to teach Len, okay, feel the feelings, but now you don't need to cry for 25 minutes. We're going to move
Please,
past
please
it.
stop crying.
Right. What can you do to change this situation? But if I'm trying to teach my daughter the same principles that, again, everything's principles, teach her the same principles that then follow you into a relationship. Because if she learns at a young age of 3, it's okay to feel my feelings, but I don't need to stay in this state for 25 minutes. I can change it. What can I do to change this state? What got me to the point of crying? Was I in control of that? 99.9999999% of the time you were, so then how can we move past it and be in control of it? I think that principle that I'm teaching a 3-year-old is literally the foundation of a relationship. I don't know. Throwing it out there.
I as a dad to 2 young girls, I have experienced so many tears in the last 5 years, so much crying on a daily basis.
All the tears.
And I think you want to going into being a dad, I think I believed the whole thing of like, well, boys and girls, they're not that much different necessarily when they're young or whatever. And I thought like, yeah, that's probably mostly true. I'm sure they are different, the way they behave or whatever. Well, I've got friends who have sons, and compared to what I go through with the way that they parent their kids, I mean, it is so different dealing with little boys than it is with little girls because on the one hand, you know, okay, here's an example. So I had my one buddy come over and he's got 4 boys at this point. And we're talking in the kitchen and we're having a conversation, we're trying to talk about something and like his son comes in and starts, like, "Hey dad, I want to show you this one thing." And he goes, "Hey, we're talking, go away for a second." And he kind of like nudges him to the side. And I just stared at him. I was like, if I did that to Lily, if I did what you just did to my daughter, she would have a meltdown. She'd cry. She would cry so hard that daddy had just told her to go away. Like, you can't do that to a little girl.
Right.
And I don't know. I think having, I love having girls because I've learned so much from them. And I think it's really helped me with my relationship with my wife, too.
I do too. Not you, but I mean me. I
Yeah.
concur. Yeah, Corey, it's helped you with your relationship. Like, no,
Corey, your daughters have
You
really
sucked
helped me.
before, and now you're doing better. Yeah, and now we got, like you said, another one is on the way. We don't know if it's a boy or girl at this point yet, but if it turns out to be a boy, it's going to be a whole different experience. But having girls has been awesome. And the reason I brought that up was you talking about how to, trying to teach Sloane to kind of control her emotions, like, well, not control them, embrace them, but also realize that they don't have to control you.
To understand them. Right?
Yes, and to understand them. And I've tried to with my girls is like what I've learned through messing up a lot of times and figuring it out is that validating their feelings is incredibly important. Like being like, yes, I know this really stinks. But take a deep breath and think about it. In the middle of the initial wave of COVID and being locked down, both of them had been going to preschool and like a child care center, and that closed. And my wife is a healthcare worker, and that did not close, and Dad works from home. So what ended up happening was daddy daycare, basically. Like, I'm at home with a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old at the time. She just recently turned 3. And the one day, it was like, it kind of just like came out of nowhere that we were having problems with a lot of meltdowns and a lot of crying and a lot of being upset. And I just like, I went and I got this big stack of construction paper and I started cutting out shapes. And I was drawing circles and I was drawing clouds. And I was like, Lily, help me cut out these clouds. Help me cut out these circles. And she's like, what are we doing? And I put on the cloud, like frustrated. And then I put on another cloud, like sad. And I came out and all these different emotions that I know she goes through. And I was like, okay, each of these emotions, and I can't claim, that I came up with this. This is stuff that I've learned myself. But I was like, all of these emotions, there are ways to fix them. So it's like, if you're feeling sad, think about something today that made you feel grateful. And then if you're feeling frustrated, you need to, take a step back, sit quietly, and talk to me about why you're frustrated. And we still have all those up. They're like taped up onto our door out in the kitchen, where it's like, okay, here are the emotions. Here's the antidotes for these emotions. And each time she manages to make that work, she gets a little sticker and she puts it up there. And that day, Vanessa came home from work and she was like, "Whoa, what are you doing here?" And I was like, "I don't know." It just came to me. Daddy take care for the win.
Super dad. I'm like, okay, where am I gonna put this in my house? Like, we're doing it tomorrow.
Yeah, that was like I said, the middle of the COVID lockdown, and I was getting desperate, man. There were some tough days there.
Yeah. Luckily we were both, we have the beach, but there were
it's
still
nice.
things to do in Florida. But I think that's huge though, and you brought up a point too that having daughters, because I remember, so whenever I found out, Christy was pregnant, you and Judson both said the same. Like, I hope you have a daughter. And like at that time,
really?
yeah, and I'll never forget what you told me. At that time, you were like, I was outside with Lily today, throwing, and she was just throwing rocks. And it was like the coolest thing to like watch her just throw rocks. If you hear my daughter crying in the background right now, it's because she's supposed to get to bed. So, but and I was like, oh, that sounds fun, But like it all, like, and I do think that having a daughter helps the relationship for sure, because you start to actually learn. I don't want to say sympathize, because that's not the right word, but I think you learn to understand the divine feminine, because that's what they embody. Like, there's no filter. Like, that is all that is the feminine right there, unfiltered, in your face. I'm giving, like, the tears aren't tears. It's like passion. If that makes sense. Len, it doesn't make sense to you now. As soon as you pop out a girl, I think it'll make sense to you. It's like,
dude, I'm convinced I'm gonna have 3. So
yeah, and it's, but does that make sense, Corey? That it's like it's all, the whole essence of like a woman is tied up in this little being that's trying to be expressed, and like the tears aren't necessarily tears. It is literally just this built up, not sure how to express passion for something. Sometimes I don't know.
And sometimes I get glimpses of like, this is gonna get harder, and I don't mean that as like, when you have a girl, you get all these people making, kind of jokes like, oh, wait till they're a teenager, and like, oh, this is gonna be really rough and stuff, and it's like, I know that it's gonna be hard, but it's okay. Like, it's parenting is hard to begin with, and it gets harder, but it also gets even more awesome. Like, I love it. Like, being a dad is probably my favorite thing in the whole world. And there are definitely times with emotions and stuff where it's like, okay, I don't understand why you're crying right now. It's like, you want to be like, okay, you don't need to cry about this at the moment. But instead, I think what I've learned that I need to do is to be like, okay, it's okay to cry when you're upset, but try to well, how do I word this? It's like, it's okay to cry and to be upset, but like also realize that you can make yourself feel better too. Like that's what I try to communicate to her, and it's just a learning process, man. It's just
Yeah, I mean, you're teaching them a valuable principle at such an early age of you're in control. Like you are the creator of all of this. Like you're in control of how you feel. You hear
Yeah.
her?
poor Sloan. Bedtime isn't fun.
No. So
No, dude.
I may dip off here.
No. That's I completely understand if you have to go do daddy duty. But look, I think, granted, I'm not a father, and I think I stayed pretty quiet for this second half, the whole daddy talk. But I think I learned a lot. I think this is like really, really awesome. This wasn't even what we like intended to like talk about when we first got on here, but I love that it took this route because I think it's super beneficial, especially to hear like two girl dads just compare like experiences and how it's like helped them grow and like help their relationship and blah blah blah. Like I think it's awesome stuff to hear, and I'm glad you guys like both came on to share. So obviously, Corey, thank you so much for coming on. Like it was awesome to hear about your experience with the book, being a father, all that kind of stuff. Rocco, always good to talk to you, man.
Corey, you want to talk a little bit about the book real quick and promote it and tell them where
Yeah,
to get
dude.
it and stuff?
Well,
Also,
yeah, sure.
thank you for coming on. And this is how our podcasts go. We start with a topic and then it just goes wherever it goes. So I'm glad we
Yeah,
can get to
this
that part.
I kind of forgot that we were being recorded. It was just
Yeah.
a station
Awesome.
basically. So
Yeah, that's the
that
goal.
worked out pretty good.
Promote yourself.
I did want to say one other thing that occurred to me, and I forgot to bring it up earlier, was you mentioned several times about being powerful individuals, and I I don't think I necessarily consider myself a powerful individual, and I don't think Vanessa would consider herself one either. And I think we, but I think in a way that's kind of where some of the power comes from, is that both of us come at a lot of things with a pretty strong sense of humility. Like we know that we know when we screw up, we're going to admit when we screw up, we're going to apologize for it, we're going to do that sort of thing. And you've when you were talking about attracting the right person to your life, if I was with the wrong person, I'm kind of the opposite of you, Rocco, where you are like, I just need to be real mad, experience that emotion, and then just like get over it and stuff. For me, I'm more the subdued type, where it's like if I was really having a problem like that, I'd probably be like, okay, well, I don't have time for this. And like
Right.
I would be like, I'm out, move on. And I think where Vanessa and I really connect is that we come at everything from a sense of humility. But anyway,
Well, hold on real quick.
yeah.
That brings up a good point. See, I think this is exactly kind of the part of where we talked about the toxic masculinity and masculine and feminine.
Yeah,
to be a masculine doesn't mean you have to be a professional football player or what society or the media has shoved down your throat as a masculine. Just to be powerful doesn't mean you have to be whatever society makes you think powerful is. To me, on the observation of the outside, I think you are two very powerful people because you're creating a incredible family and an incredible dynamic together and an incredible relationship together. What's more powerful than that? And the way I view it, right? Like you don't have to build a multi-billion-dollar company to be powerful. Does that make sense? Like what I'm saying?
Absolutely. No, I was gonna, Rocco, you jumped in. I was gonna chime in too. I think, yeah, I think you're selling yourself short, man. I think it's powerful.
None of that around here, Corey.
I think that it's powerful that you decided to, write and promote and publish your own book. I think it's powerful that your wife decided to support you and tell you to absolutely 100% go for it. I think if you ask any one of your daughters, they probably think you're two of the most powerful people, on this planet. I think too often people associate power with being kind of a jackass. Like people think like if I'm loud and boisterous, and again, dip it into that toxic masculinity thing again, that's what a powerful masculine, person is. And that's not necessarily it. You could be a quietly powerful person. You can be a kind of a subdued, powerful person. It's all about how you handle yourself and how you, I guess just present yourself and how you, raise your children and, develop your relationships and how you go about your business. Like just because, go Rocco.
I mean, it's just the true essence of who you are is the powerfulness, right? Like you wouldn't, if you got on a podcast and you talk like I do, it would be fucking terrible because it's not you. Like, and it would be so glaringly obvious that it's not you, right? Like one of my favorite things that Christy said is she's like, I know when you're heating up because more fucks start to come out. And she's like, and I know when you hit your zone to where you won't remember anything, like you're in that zone when like fucks are flying like crazy. She goes, because I've been around it.
I gotta interrupt you because we had this conversation. Because when I get heated up, I start throwing around F-bombs like it's nothing. Kristen will just like look at me and go, "You feel better?" I'll be like, "Yes." It's just I needed to get that out.
And like she knows like when I'm getting in that zone of the podcast where I'm starting to like, disconnect and let Nate talk. She's like, the fucks are coming. Like here it comes. He hit it. If you talked like that, you wouldn't be talking from your innate. That's not you. Doesn't mean you're not powerful.
Authenticity, right?
Right. So
that's probably the most powerful thing you can be is just authentically you, right?
Yeah, and that's where I think the advice of like I hear it said all the time is like, fake it till you make it. It's like don't fake it because people can tell. People can tell if you're not being your authentic self. It's so obvious when somebody, gets on and tries to be Gary Vee, and it's just like that's you're not you. That's not the way it's going. And I think I've probably been guilty of that, especially in the early days of freelance work, interviewing with clients or whatever, and trying to sound very confident and know what I'm doing and everything. So I'm probably guilty of that. Anyway, I derailed the conversation right when we were doing our wrap up. So I'm sorry about that.
It was good. It's all purposeful, everything. I'm sure someone will get something out of it. So wrap it up. Tell us all about you, your books, and where to buy them.
Well, I write science fiction and fantasy. The first book that I put out was called The Fallen Odyssey, and it's a portal fantasy novel where it's about a teenager who like goes to an alternate world, and it's all about him trying to find his way home. It's kind of like if you mixed Lord of the Rings with a more contemporary fantasy story. And then I also have a science fiction thriller, which is kind of like a film noir. You could compare it to like Blade Runner. That one they're all available on Amazon. The science fiction one, which is called A Knife in the Dark, is also available on Audible. And you can get all those things through my website, thefallenodyssey.com. So that's my spiel.
Thanks, Rocco.
That's
awesome.
I also I'm gonna chime in real quick. It's the only fiction books I've ever read in my entire life. So,
and you finished, right?
I finished. God, I finished. I finished. I couldn't put them down, and I finished them in chiropractic school when I had 30 credit hours every 10 weeks to take. So they're that good.
If that's not a testimonial, I don't know what is. Listen to Doc Rock.
That's awesome, guys, and I'll definitely be buying and reading those too. Because unlike Rocco, I am a big fiction guy, and I love science fiction, so that's right up my alley.
Awesome. Well, it was really nice to meet you also, Len, and I appreciate that. And I didn't even know you were a fantasy fan. Otherwise, I would have been probably texting you way earlier, like, check out this book, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, dude. Anything you come across that you think, fantasy, sci-fi, all that stuff, I love reading to escape reality. So, again, man, thank you for coming on. This has been really, really awesome. It kind of like deviated from kind of our norm, but I think it's super powerful, super important for people to hear. So, awesome stuff. And
cool. Thank you for having me. I hope you'll have me back because it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely, man.
I loved it. Awesome. Thanks, Corey.
We're in it for the long haul, so we'll be here.
All right, awesome.
We will do another one. There will be a part 2.
All right, guys. I'm gonna log it off right now.